As a way of centering us for our time today, I want to share with you Psalms 104. I'll be reading verses 1 through 9 and then verse 24 and closing with the end of verse 35. Bless the Lord, O my soul. O Lord my God, you are very great. You are clothed with honor and majesty, wrapped in the light as with a garment. You stretch out the heavens like a tent. You set the beams of your chambers on the waters. You make the clouds your chariot. You ride on the wings of the wind. You make the winds your messenger, fire and flame your ministers. You set the earth on its foundation, so that it shall never be shaken. You cover it with the deep as with a garment. The waters stood above the mountains. At your rebuke they flee. At the sounds of your thunder they take to flight. They rose up the mountains, ran down to the valleys, to the place that you appointed for them. You set a boundary that they may not pass, so that they might not again cover the earth. O Lord, how manifold are your works. In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. Bless the Lord, O my soul. Praise the Lord. Welcome you to our recording. I'm in for my weekly conversation with my son, Trey, as we talk about the upcoming lectionary passage for this Sunday being the 21st Sunday after Pentecost. And we also just kind of check up and talk about topics that are going on in our world today. For it helps to put some kind of context for us to be able to hear the reading for this week. We are delighted that you have decided to spend some time with us. It means a great deal to us when we hear from you. And you said that there was something that we said from the recording that gave you some comfort at a time when you needed that, or something that challenged you, particularly to look at the Scripture in a new way, as all of us on this journey of discipleship, trying to live out who we believe God has called us to be. So we're deeply appreciative of the time. We know that there are a lot of options, a lot of things that you could be doing, but for you to just spend a little time with us means a great deal to us. Also, very appreciative of those of you who then send us encouraging words, those who continue to support the ministry here at Hobson. So we're thankful. Always an important time for us whenever we gather at Hobson, whether it is in worship or in fellowship or in study, is to share with one another those joys and celebrations. We are a praying congregation, and so we like to pray for one another and like to lift one another up in times of prayer. A part of the celebrations that we particularly enjoy are celebrating birthdays that are in, and they're coming up for the upcoming week. Even on times where we might not have one, we'll stretch and get some third cousins, some outlaws, or in-laws, or whatever it takes, so that we'll be able to sing, because it gives us an opportunity to celebrate the gift of 360 more times around the sun. So it's important to us. This week, we want to lift up in our birthday shout-outs a very special shout-out to a dear friend, Tanya Osborne, whose birthday is on Sunday. So we want to say happy birthday to her, to Henderson Kelly, Alex Coor, former classmate of mine, Warner B. Jenkins Jr., Alicia Wright, a cousin of Trey's and Sonia Cornell Randall, Sherry Lewis, Marguerite Simmons, Barbara Thompson, and a cousin of mine, Monica Townsend. We want to send them all birthday shout-outs. We want to continue to be in prayer for those who recently have lost loved ones. It seems as though Grief is very much a part of who we are and a part of our prayer lives. I want to add that this week the prayers ask for you to pray for the family and friends of Ronnie Yates Sr., a local musician who touched the lives of a lot of people. I was reading on Facebook, a cousin, Patrick Dixon, was talking about how Ronnie had taken him under his wings when at an early stage and had been a great supporter of his, and so I want to lift him up. We are praying for traveling mercies. We are finishing up with fall break, and people are coming back, and a lot of people have been traveling and are traveling on this weekend. So we ask for prayers for them and hope and pray that it was a time of rejuvenation for each of them. We continue to be in prayer for those who are infected and affected by the COVID-19. While the numbers are going down, it is still something that we need to very much be concerned about within our communities. And so we continue to pray. And as they are making boosters available, I want to pray for those who to go out and to get those, and for those who have not yet received their initial vaccine, we're praying for them also. And while we're praying for that, we want to continue to pray for the mean-spiritedness that is so evident, and for people who are spreading a lot of misinformation, and in some cases are just taking stances that are contradictory to what the scientists have said about the vaccine. So we are in prayer for all of that, and praying for the safety for not only for those who have received their vaccine, but even for those who have not. Want to pray for those who have been the violence that continues to be very much a part of our community, and it doesn't appear to be a day that we don't turn on the television and hear some act of violence that has destroyed a family. And so we are praying for that in this time. As I said, prayer is very important to us, and if you have special prayer concerns or celebrations that you want us to be in prayer with, or want me as the pastor of this congregation to be in prayer with, please let me know. It is, as I say, probably the most important ministry that we have in this place is praying for one another, because we believe that it is through prayer that God shows us how it is that we need to respond and how it is that we live out being in this community of believers. So please send me an email. You can send it to me on Facebook. You can call me, text me, however it is. We want to be in prayer for one another, and so we are praying for you now. And pray that all is well, and that you are truly aware of the love that God has for you. Amen. Our reading for this week comes from Mark's Gospel, the 10th chapter, and I'll be reading verses 35 through 45, and I will be using the New Revised Standard Version. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came forward to him and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And Jesus said to them, "What is it you want me to do for you?" And they said to him, "Grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your glory." But Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with?" They replied, "We are able." Then Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink, you will drink, and with the baptism which I was baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or at my left is not mine to grant, but it's for those whom it has been prepared." When the 10 heard this, they began to be angry with James and John. So Jesus called them and said to them, "You know that among the Gentiles, those whom they recognize as their rulers lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. But it is not so among you. But whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. After spending a couple of weeks with Job and breaking off, seriously considered going yet another week with Job, but wanted to return to this important passage in Mark's Gospel. It is a particular one that is important for all of us who claim that we are followers of Jesus Christ and want to be disciples of Him. This passage, which challenges us to take a look at what does it truly mean and what are the expectations that we have that Jesus has of us for those of us who claim that title for ourselves. So we're back at it and want to take a look at it. Must admit that. Many say it is very difficult for us to, when we're looking at this passage, we tend to put it in contemporary terms, and some of the words and the phrasing that I look at it, we look at it through our modern eyes, and it is hard for us to really hold on to some of the meanings of it earlier, particularly when he responds and says to. Talks about being servants and slaves. It is hard for us that when we hear that word slave, not to put it into the context of what it means to us in these United States of America, and in particular for those people of whom are people of color. And then when we look at what's happening in the world and how so many people have been taken and abused, for anyone to think of taking on the notion of being a slave, it is just hard for us to. It's hard for us to grasp. But I do think that it does help us that when we just that rather than focusing on those words and those phrases that challenge us, is to look at it and look at it all within context. The thing that disturbs me about the passage and about the John and James's request is that this comes if you're reading the story of Mark, and I always encourage you to do that. I like to read it kind of like a mini series, and knowing that the events that happen before it, before each reading, ought to be taken into consideration, that the stories do not stand alone. And so immediately before this passage, Jesus has said for the third time in Mark, is talking about him going to Jerusalem, and the fact that he will be handed over and he will be killed. He talks about the horrors of the death, and it is just hard for us that when we're reading this and to understand, and for us to just think about what Jesus must have been going through as he was journeying along that day, and how he has been talking to them, and each time he gives them a little bit more and more. And while it's three times in the telling of the story, it's hard for me to conceive of that Jesus only brought it up three times. that as he has made, after he made that decision to go Jerusalem, I am sure that it was probably a part of the nightly conversations, as a part of his teaching, as he was trying to get the disciples ready for what was going to happen, that he did not bring it up. But in this particular case, and in this story that we have, I mean, it comes immediately after that. And when John and James go to him, and they go and they say, "We got something to ask you." It just seems, just on the surface, that the request and what they're about to ask is so insensitive that in the midst of, this, that what Jesus is going through, to come in and to say, we need to ask a favor of you. And I kind of imagine, even as they're going, while they're not thinking about Jesus, they still have a little apprehension maybe about asking the question. You kind of hear in the voice, because they said, well, we want you to do whatever we ask, and kind of reminds you, when you're kids, or when you're talking to kids, and kids, will come up to you and say, I need you to do something, and I need you to say yes before I ask, because y'all don't need you to say no. And so they go with that same kind of spirit to Jesus and says, Jesus, this is what we would like, and that is that when you come into your kingdom, we want to sit. One of us wants to be on the right, and one of us wants to be on the left. We want to have these positions of influence, these positions of power, and the positions of entitlement. Now we all criticize them for this request, because we look back and we know that that wasn't what they should have done. And we, as I say, we become critical. But the reality of it is that for most of us, that's the way we think. And it's not it wasn't something that was just limited to their times. But it is, I guess, almost a part of us as human nature that has been passed down, is that we're always looking at how it is that we can get ahead. We're looking how we win. I mean, when we take on jobs, we want to know how fast can we move? How fast can we move up the ladder? When we take on whether it's in sports. I mean, we in football, we're in the football season. I mean, we're talking about who's going to win the Super, who's going to move to the top. And who is going to be successful, because we view that somehow with the success becomes that life gets easier for us, that it is a sign that we have been rewarded for our efforts and for our work. And I just imagine that for John and for James, and we will ultimately find out even for the other 10 when they get mad at them for making that request. But they probably have said, look, we've been with you. We accepted the invitation. We've been hanging out with you. That we left home. For John and James, they left their father's business to follow him, and so there has to be something of benefit for what they've gone through, and so they want to be on the right and on the left. As soon as they ask the question, Jesus then says to them, well, I don't know, that what what you're asking is, I need to know, will you be able to drink of this cup that I am about to drink, and will you be able to be baptized by the baptism that I will be baptized? And still, I think not really thinking it through. And even though they have listened to all, they have heard what Jesus has said. I don't think that they have listened to what Jesus is saying, because Jesus is saying, it is going to be brutal. It is going to be ultimately lead to death. It's going to lead to great suffering on my part. And they say, yes, we're able. And then Jesus says to them, then you will drink of the cup and you will be baptized. Why they didn't realize it at that point in time, and we know the end of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say, and that ultimately that both James and John will both be killed. James will be killed by Herod, and it is reported that John was killed by being boiled in oil. So they ultimately, but when they're thinking of it in the terms and they're making the request, then they don't really know what is the outcome that they're ultimately going to have to deal with. But then Jesus says, well, but even though you're gonna go through this, I still can't. I still, you say you're going to do it, but I still can't grant you the seats on the right or on the left, because that's not mine to do. But the people who will be there will be the ones of whom it has already been prepared for. It is hard for me to read this story and not think about the fact that the time when we do visit, when we do think of Jesus as entering into the kingdom and crossing over, is at the time that he's on the cross and he dies. And we know from the story that as he enters into paradise, that on his right and on his left are two criminals that die with him, that Jesus says to them, today you will be with me. So we don't know. And it is for us an invitation to be reminded that for us, that being a follower and going the way of being a disciple of Jesus will ultimately mean that it will not be easy, that it will be difficult, it will be challenging, and that at times we will have to suffer. The story goes on in the second part. After he's had this and shared with them, he realizes and overhears the other 10 who are mad at John and James. They're mad because they've asked the question and made the request. They heard the request and are mad at them because they didn't get to ask first. So they're squawking, amongst themselves. I think it's interesting, when we think of it. Even Matthew will later kind of change up the story. We believe Mark was written first, and then later on we will say that it wasn't John and James; it was their mother that asked them. That we kind of want to soften it a little bit, but regardless of who it was the people are just kind of upset that the request came before, because, as I said, like them and like the other 10 and like us, just our images of the Messiah, the King, that even though they may have casually kind of heard that this was going to happen, they had no concept that this was going to happen in a matter of weeks, that maybe after, he had served, a long time, that maybe there would have been some kind of revolt. But at that time, they would have been firmly entrenched and be able to handle it. But Jesus, says to them, and then begins to give them the lecture them about what it is and what are the expectations for them, and says, while you're thinking about, who is number one, the one who is number one may end up being the last, and the last may be the first, and that if you really want to be, you got to rethink of what it means to be in leadership and what it means to be enrolled. Because then he kind of goes and says, look at the rulers of the world and look at the people of whom, in particular, the backdrop against the Roman Empire that they're going up against. That look at their leaders and look at how their leaders, what happens when they get in control. We certainly understand that in our time, that once people get to be and have a certain degree of power, then they lord it over us and they take advantage of us. And Jesus says, for those of whom are my followers and those who would choose to be my disciples, they've got to reverse that, and you've got to look at it, that it is what you do for others. It is how you meet the needs. It's how you embrace the agenda. And he invites them to examine his life and the time that they have been with him, and to see how he, even though he came and that they view him as the Messiah, he has spent all of his ministry in helping those, in particular, in helping those who are the least. Just a few verses before this, Jesus has compared himself to a child, and talking about what it means to be vulnerable. And that's where he says that that phrase, that you must be a servant, and whoever wishes to be first must be a slave to all. As I say, we don't grasp that, but what I think Jesus was inviting them and inviting us to do is that the agenda is not our personal agenda, that as we follow. It is not about us and our desires and how it is that we want to work things out, but it is being completely submissive to the will of God and responding to God. It is about putting others first before it is about us. It's about how it is that we build the community without having our own personal agendas for that, and that Jesus is saying to them that is how you will be recognized by the one who will ultimately make the determination about where you get and where your status is. But even with that when you become that slave to that, and when you become that, and that you're not even concerned about that all that you're concerned about is being able to do the will of the one of whom you are a slave to. So we're going to take a little closer look at that, and to ask ourselves the question, where are and what are some of the circumstances and situations in our lives of where we have to give up our own desires of trying to be entitled and trying to be privileged, of trying to find ways that we can have the rewards, or whether we're focusing on the ease, or whether we're even looking at about being lordship. You got to think, when they're asking about, wanting to be on the right and the left, you kind of look at it as being, in a contemporary political kind of terms, one of us wants to be the vice president, the other one wants to be secretary of state. We want our positions in it. But Jesus invites us to take to look at it from a different perspective, and so we'll look at it in our context on Sunday. What is it that we would have to do in order for us to be slaves to the one who has called us? Amen. Well, Trey, how things going with you?
Man, things are going pretty good. I won't complain. It's October. This is my favorite time of the year.
Yeah, well, it's been a little warm, above the average the
Yeah,
last
for sure.
few days, but by this weekend, by the time this is on, it will be more fall-like, and so be a little, in fact, a little under average. So I know you are indeed looking forward to that. So
Yeah. So how you doing? Everything good?
yeah, everything's been pretty good. Just trying to. We got some, people, part of the congregation who are just struggling, and so been trying to figure out ways to be supportive of them and just creating a presence and letting them know that we're praying for them in this time, and and while doing that, also have been able to deal with a little celebration. Got to. Samir, got to see him playing soccer this week, and he had a birthday, so all of that's good. And then, of course, fall break, even daycare does fall break. So been hanging with Mr. Mason. So it's been a good week.
So you think John Gruden's been having a good week? or have you even been keeping up with that John Gruden stuff?
Well, I've kept up with it a little bit. You asked me how my week was.
Yeah, no. I'm just at my next question. How you think John Gruden's week has turned out?
I think John Gruden's week has been one of great anger.
So he's angry about the week, or?
Well, I think he's angry that that the things that he said and the opinions that he expressed along within these emails. I think probably some of them there may have been some joking and some kidding that got a hand, but most of them I think just came from his. Just who he was, and
sure.
And so he was expressing his opinions, and I think the anger comes in is that that he ultimately got fired or lost his coaching position because he shared his opinion at a time where he was voicing opposition to some other people who were expressing their opinions. I mean, a lot of these took places as to where the NFL was looking at issues around the treatment of women, and so
this was 10 years ago, though, right?
Well, it was 10 years ago, and from 10,000. From 2011 until I think the last email was 2018.
Okay, so and I'm saying that to say, do you think for all practical purposes and for conversation purposes that the Raiders knew exactly who he was? Like, I don't think John Gruden is a guy that hides that side of himself, right? That I think he would be the first on my list of people to say that, yeah, he uses racial slurs, right? I mean, he just looks like it. And you know what? And I may be, far removed from a lot of the stuff that, causes a lot of people anger with this whole thing, but I kind of have a little bit more respect for somebody that I suspect being or uses racially charged language, that they do it out in the open. At least I know what I'm dealing with, right? That it's not something that they hide behind, right? So I
don't think. First of all, during the same time this was happening, Gruden was becoming a star.
Sure.
And had become, a little bit of a cult hero because of his being on Monday Night Football. So I imagine when they called him, that Washington, that the Raiders wanted a star. They wanted a bad boy, so to speak, and so I would imagine that when he went in, that they had some idea as to what he was, but they also probably thought within themselves at that point in time, well, he may have been that way, but he won't be that way moving forward. That he will
So
we'll call it back.
So what are your thoughts on things coming back that you may have said that may have been a little off-putting, racist or whatever? How do you feel about somebody losing their livelihood because of those words? I mean, do you think that his words and all of those emails, the reaction to that, you think it was justified?
Well, I don't think he lost. That may have been the reason that he was. First of all, they were making an investigation about the Washington football team and just the kind of climate, and so these were some of the remarks and how he clearly was opposed to some of the directions that they were going. I don't think he lost his job because of that. I think he lost his job because of the arrogance that he thought he could just easily dismiss it simply by saying, well, I didn't mean to hurt anybody, so leave me alone. I am 4-1. My team is winning. And so it was the arrogance. It was kind of like, in the message, I think he just thought he was privileged, that he was, and that some of the people that he had shared that with, it was none of your business. I mean, you're going to criticize me for saying that. I wasn't saying anything that probably 90% of the owners or whoever whoever he was sending the email to, probably, they may have laughed at it, may have, dismissed it. It doesn't appear that anybody said, John, you don't need to be talking that way. But once he got caught, a lot of times, or a lot of people, when you get caught, you just got to fess up to it. And I honestly do believe that when it first came out, and it was the racial one, and it came out, as they normally say, black folks are very forgiving. All you need to go into the locker room and tell the black folks, I'm just sorry, I've been hanging around y'all so long. I done heard y'all say those kind of things, and I know I shouldn't have said it. It's just like some of, I used to, be around, certain white folks that thought that because they hung out and they were gangster, they could use the N-word, like black folks were using. Well, that's what y'all call one another. We down, all that kind of stuff.
But do you think that that's justified, though? Do you think even if he says it to his homeboys or in his car singing a song, do you think it is justified for him to say the N-word or any kind of racial slur that 10 years ago, now you have to reap the consequences of those actions, whether I agree with them or not, that you lose your job? Do you think that that's justified? That was my question.
Well, I do, because at the point that if you don't do anything or nobody does anything, then when somebody else brings it up, and the criticism, so now you're going to have all these people coming in and say, oh, well, you ain't doing things, so everybody must be using it. Everybody must feel that way. Everybody must feel like, that gays cannot play in the NFL, that women ought not to have any roles, that women ought not to be official. So if you don't do something, then it casts that everybody must feel that way. And so
come on, man. Come on. I don't know the Bible like you, right? Mm-hmm. But I would imagine that there are stories that are similar to this topic. that maybe just because you don't agree with his sentiment or the topic of in which he was having a discussion that was in all, practical purposes and practical terms, it was private, right? It wasn't something for the masses. It wasn't like he was in a press conference and he used a racial slur in a press conference or at a team meeting or something like that.
But he is not in a private position. So now
10 years ago he was.
No. But I mean, even today, with 10 years ago, and so I think this is what goes back. That when you had him in that position, then you go back and you look at the decisions that have been made and looked at how I think there were two things. One, just how he talked about his boss. Now, the mere fact that you talk about your boss that way, whether or not you agree with any of the other kind of thing, you shouldn't have been doing that. But then the people go back and look, when I went into Gruden's office and I got cut, I didn't get cut because I wasn't a player. I got cut because of this attitude. And so ultimately it became a business decision because when it goes into Gruden now, and you have that kind of, it would be almost similar to, you might jokingly say, oh, well, I ain't gonna never have no Q, because accused of this, accused of that. Then all of a sudden, you working at the state, a person that comes in didn't get the job, that felt like they were qualified on the job, and then they go back and say, oh, I got an email from Trey saying, where Trey said, Qs don't need no jobs. And so then it becomes a lawsuit. Well, you may have been joking with that, but people are able to use that. And so I think ultimately it becomes a business decision that now can you trust them and can you trust the organization? That when you bring a problem to them, and we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing, these young ladies that were in the gymnastic and say, hey, we brought our issue, but nobody paid attention. Well, they didn't pay attention because the people who were making the decision were like the John Grudens of the world. They made a joke out of it and moved it past other things. And so if you're going to move forward, then there has to be some, some consequences now.
Sure.
And so I think it for him, it was a lack of any remorse about what he did. So I think that was part of it.
What did he do wrong, though? In my opinion, I don't think he did anything wrong. I don't. I think he has an opinion, right, that you might not agree with. That the people that he insulted, black people, homosexuals, women, if you don't agree with it, you don't agree with it. But that doesn't mean use that position to say, all right.
But I don't want him to be my representative.
Well, if you the Raiders, is that what you're saying, or the NFL?
But if the NFL is moving in a different direction,
sure, yeah,
they're moving in a different direction around some of the issues that he spoke out about,
right?
Then I can't move in that direction by still having and condoning the people who are making those decisions.
Okay, all right. Let me ask you this. And I'm just gonna,
Yeah.
Do you remember when you first became a preacher that was paid by the United Methodist Church? Okay, and what year was that?
1999.
99. So in 89, right? Some of the conversations and some of the people that you were dealing with and your thought of you, right? And because you are the first to admit that you were sexist, you were a recovering homophobe, all of those things, right?
Right.
So would it have been fair? Would it have been something that you would be able to say, you know what? I might not have been in the right place, in the right mind 10 years ago. That, because now I'm a preacher. Now I'm in this position that may have been wrong. But is that worth somebody saying, "Oh, Sonny said this 10 years ago, and let's not let him preach. Let's not let him be a pastor because he said something that was kind of creepish, kind of, yeah."
Oh, well, no. I mean, first of all, I mean, I have been one who, as I say, have openly, made, comments, and probably, may have been in some emails. I wasn't real big on Instagram. I know I didn't have anything on Instagram because I said on you.
But email wasn't out there in '89. But okay,
no,
not like that. But
well,
anyway,
not like that. But anyway,
right?
But my point is that I have worked since then of one, first of all, acknowledging that I was wrong,
Sure.
and that and trying to make amends for anybody that I might have hurt along the way,
Right.
and working to make things different. And that's just what I said with Gruden. Gruden did not acknowledge that I was wrong. He didn't acknowledge that there has been a change of heart. Well, I want to thank you once again for spending some time, and in particular for our conversation. You probably got more out of the conversation with Trey than the setting up of the framework for the message. But I think it's a lot of similarities for both, because what we're talking about is power and our own individual sense of what it means to be in power, to be in control, what it is that we work for, and yet at the same time, I think Jesus calls each of us to be concerned, not so much with ourselves, but with others, and how it is that we serve those who are around us. And when it becomes about others, then I do think that begins to change our speech, our habits, our patterns, our actions. So it's something for us to think about, something for you to think about in these times. But I just want to thank you for tuning in, and hope that your week is a good one, that you take care and be well and stay safe.